Hello and welcome to Still Digging, a show where a panel of archaeologists discuss the world of archaeology, presented by the ArchaeoRPG Collective. I'm your host, Bill, and the panel will include, hopefully, Amma, Serra, and Tom. I think Tom's back. Today, we're going to talk about Amma's summer vacation, if she can manage to join the call, poop knives, Tom's interactions with Scott Wolter, and I will talk about our news show, which will be debuting at the top of this hour, Rituals and Rolls Recaps. So, let's dig in. So while I'm ringing a group, let me go ahead and talk about poop. So, earlier this week, the Journal of Archaeological Science Reports, through Science Direct, published an article by archaeologists and other scientists from Kent State University and the Cleveland Museum of Natural History in Cleveland, Ohio. And it got our attention because... Hello, Tom.
Hello?
Hi.
Hey!
Okay, good. Yes. Let me keep going.
Okay.
All right.
So I'm no longer hearing an echo.
Great. So the title of this article, which drew our attention, I mean, we are all professional archaeologists, so we're going to be scouring the academic journals all the time anyway to sort of help improve our knowledge. But this particular
how we share
one
secrets with each other.
caught our eyes. I mean, it's a sharing of information. It's how we grow as a field. This one, though, happened to catch our eye. It was entitled, Experimental Replication Shows Knives Manufactured from Frozen Human Feces Do Not Work. Now, you may not understand with the technical jargon there, but they're talking poop knives.
Mm-hmm. Can we talk about what thought process had to happen in order to choose to do this experiment? Like, the conversation had to go something along the lines of, hey, have you heard this story about poop knives? Yeah, sounds pretty dumb. We should check it out anyway. Can you poop in this bag? Like...
And where the story comes from is that there's an ethnography published in 1998 by a Davis. I don't have his first name immediately in front of me. And it's called The Shadows in the Sun, and it's an ethnographic study of Inuit people up in the Arctic region. And the quote they used here to sort of like, this is the apocryphal story which sort of leads to the whole poop knife. There's a well-known account, quoting, there's a well-known account of an old Inuit man who refused to move into a settlement. Over the objections of his family, he made plans to stay on the ice. To stop him, they took away all his tools. So in the midst of a winter gale, he stepped out of their igloo, defecated, and honed the feces into a frozen blade, which he sharpened with a spray of saliva. With the knife, he killed a dog and used its rib cage as a sled and its hide to harness another dog. He disappeared into the darkness. End quote.
There are so many parts of that story.
You're trying to say the story maybe doesn't smell right?
It sounds allegorical if it sounds like anything. But it sounds like it sounds like a made-up story to make the person sound foolish. Are you? Hold on.
Well, yes. That was definitely one of the early.
Are you familiar with the term cadology?
No, I am not. Continue.
So this is
Elaborate.
it's 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 like shenanigans. It's an Irish colloquialism. um that it's basically it's like the art of bluffing, if that makes sense,
Yes. Now, to be fair,
right?
Davis himself, in his ethnography, accounts for the fact that this
Hmm.
was most likely an apocryphal tale.
Yeah.
And because this was about a woman he was interviewing, and it was about her grandfather, and allegedly this story took place in the 1950s, so 40, 50 years prior to this interview. So there's definitely you have all the classic markers. It's someone happened to my family, but they're not here now, and it happened a couple generations ago. It's sort of how a lot of stories begin. But for some reason, it had become sort of a popular, I guess, among certain fans of ethnographies and anthropological undergrads over the past 20 years.
Well, sure.
Um,
Like Malinowski's journals.
yeah, so that's what drew it to the attention of these folks. Now, I have not checked anyone's sort of credentials. Um,
I mean, it's polished. It's
to
polished.
be fair, no one is
It's
listed as a PhD in the thing on here. So these may be undergrads. I
but
would
they
need to
got it.
confirm that.
What's
It'd be
the journal it's published in again?
um, the Journal of Archaeological Science Reports.
Huh.
It's published by Elsevier, Elsevier, and I think I've heard of that before.
Wasn't that the one that they were having issues with, like there was some sort of corruption issues with aggressive citing on things or something?
I'm not
Hold on.
sure.
Or maybe that's
But yeah, I
something
mean, yes. So
else.
this is the classic. I mean, if we were talking about, if we want to like venture into the world of how to identify and deal with like things like pseudoscience, or how to read an academic journal, the first thing you should do is, just because it's from an academic journal, don't necessarily take it at face value. You can check to see the credentials of this journal. Is it a peer reviewed journal? We don't know. Um, we don't know if this article has been peer reviewed. I highly doubt it, because the article itself is only a 1 3/4 page for the total length of this article.
Huh. Well, I mean, they didn't have a lot of data to go with since none of their poop knives worked.
But I know what you may be thinking right now. Yeah, poop knives, apocryphal story. But you're telling me these fools actually tried to make them. How the hell did they
Hmm.
do that? I'm glad you asked, Lucas, because you're the only person I think watching at the moment. But many people will be listening to this, and I also mean you too, that listening in your car
Later
later.
listeners.
Hey, we get plenty of later listeners,
Yeah. Future fans.
future fans.
Yeah.
So one of the team. Once again, I mean, it's so small, I might as well just go ahead and quote from these things, because they do a better job than I do. So, once again, this is a quote
Don't lie,
directly
Lucas. We know you want to know.
from the article here. Quote: in order to procure the necessary raw material for knife production, one of us, MIE, that's the initials of one of the party, one of the team, went on a diet of high protein and fatty acids, which is consistent with Arctic diets for 8 days. And they cite Binford from 2012 and Fugagali from 2015, citing table S1 as supplementary materials. So, continue the quote. The Inuit do not only eat meat from maritime and terrestrial animals, and there were 3 instances during the 8-day diet that MIE ate fruit, vegetables, or carbohydrates. Raw material collected did not begin until day 4, and then proceeded regularly for the next 5 days. Fecal samples were formed into knives using ceramic molds, knife molds, or molded by hand, hand-shaped knives. All fecal samples were stored at minus 20 Celsius until the experiment began. Okay, another thing that's got my skeptical eye here on my second reading after I finished giggling, the language they're using. That's not journal language.
This feels like one
this
of
is
those
freshman.
ones that
This is undergrad goof paper. Now they may have done these experiments.
Here's a question though, because there was a group out there that was like actively getting fake articles published to show how some journals' peer review process is very shaky.
Right. Now, here we could start off with this. You could look up whether Shadows in the Sun by A. W. Davis travels to landscape. Shadows in the Sun by W. Davis, 1998, Island Press, Washington, D.C.
Yep.
It
travels to landscape of spirit and desire.
Okay. See, we're doing live science for you here. As you know, we're doing inspections and peer reviews, and the skeptical eye is now in full focus for this. So, while Tom does a little more of our background research, I'm going to continue sort of explaining how they went about their test. So they now have poop knives. And so how are they testing these poop knives? So what they do is procure some pig hide, some pig muscle, and tendon. These were also stored at minus 20 degrees until 2 days before the experiment began, at which they were allowed to begin to thaw up to 4 degrees Celsius. Minutes prior to the experiment, both the knife molds samples and the hand-shaped knives were removed from the laboratory freezer and further sharpened with a metal file. The knives were then buried for several minutes in minus 50-degree dry ice to ensure that they were sufficiently frozen until any attempts at slicing. And if you're wondering about the health about this, the study was approved by the Institutional Biosafety Committee at Kent State University. Kent State, you get a shout out for that. So for anyone from Kent State who's watching or listening to us later, you're following safety protocols, and we appreciate that. So, any new information before I go into the results?
So I found it. It's on page 20 of the Wade Davis book.
Okay.
And it did it have the part about sharpened with a spray of saliva?
Yes. I threw that in there. Yes, sharpened with spray of saliva with the knife he killed a dog.
Yep. So, he uses ribcage just sudden. Yeah. Okay.
So this is from a real book.
It's from a real book. Wow. just wow.
Okay. That's also now reminding you that cultural anthropologists are the real crazy people. Apologies to all cultural anthropologists watching and listening right now.
Again, I cite Melanowski.
But you know it. You know it. All right. Enough suspense. Do we want to know if this worked? Well, one, I kind of told you when I read the title of the paper. But two, let's find out what happened. So, to continue our story, quote, "We began our cutting experiment with the hide, reasoning that if our knives could not cut hide, then subsequent attempts with muscle and tendon would be futile. Neither the knife mold sample nor the hand-shaped knife could cut through the hide. Despite the hide being cold from refrigeration, instead of slicing through the knife edge simply melted upon contact, leaving a streak of fecal matter."
Oh, wow.
Remember, still digging, the classiest archaeology show on the internet. Was it like 3-4 weeks ago? We were doing the entire long pee discussion in the
The
field.
what?
Pee,
Oh
pee
yeah.
in the field.
The
Yes.
law? Was that last week?
No, 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 no. As way back.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. No,
We
okay. So
we
here's
yeah. Go.
here's my thing. So this is special poop, created from a diet of high protein, high fat, matching cultures in the north, right? Um, that's gotta smell. That's gotta have an odor to it, and there's no way there's no getting around that.
Well, I mean, the one thing, I mean, they're trying to, one, it was only 8 days. I don't know if that's enough to sort of alter your internal flora and fauna, which may also be
I
another
don't know.
factoring element into it. And two, he wasn't eating seal. Seal itself may have special little properties that makes them sharp.
Yeah, that's right. I was just listening to um, what was it? The Dirt podcast, and they were talking about seal blood ceramic bowls, and they got on a little bit of a tangent about the seal blood, and apparently certain times a year you can actually use it as glue. It's so thick,
Yeah, so
which is really impressive.
so if you have a diet which consists of that stuff and you're consuming that stuff, what does that do?
That's kind of
You like what? Yeah, what does seal blood do to your poo? I mean, who's answering these questions?
it might make it more solid.
We may need to do a follow-up experiment here at Still Digging.
You, on your own, bud. I don't want to have anything to do with
We're going. We would obviously stream it.
I don't think we can do that on YouTube.
It's for science.
I mean, sure, but
Why does YouTube hate
gross.
science? Huh?
I think YouTube hates poop. Most FCC regulations are kind of
Well, samples are
a
of
little,
course
a
going to
little
be given
whippy
by
on
those
that.
who aren't here. It's kind of the
Yeah, good luck talking into that.
it's kind of the not it not
Sure,
it scenario.
sure. Well, I'm not making the knives either.
The hand-shaped ones. All right.
That is something.
But wait, we are not done yet.
We're not.
Because these are scientists here, all right? This was a single
Sure.
point. This was a single point of data. These were,
Right.
you can't just go by single points of data. So, once again, to quote, we repeated the experiment using the fecal sample of another team member, MRB, whose diet was more traditionally Western. The hand-shaped knives were subject to the same procedures and temperatures as the first set of knives. However, these knives did not cut through the hide. For curiosity's sake, we tried to cut the subcutaneous flat on the underside of the hide. With some difficulty, only the shallowest of slices could be produced, and the knife edge still quickly melted and deteriorated.
I. Nope. I still can't. I still can't get. It's better science. They're trying different diets,
What?
but also still real gross.
So, in an unforeseen segue, or synergy, I should say, putting things together, this paper was presented at the SAA's, the Society of American
What?
Archaeology Conference, 2019, Albuquerque, New Mexico. Some archaeologists may remember this as being a total shit show.
Oh.
Ironically, there was a paper presented about poop knives.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, I'm reading the acknowledgments, and they're like, yeah, they had like 4 people look at it and an anonymous reviewer. So I'm guessing this was a student paper, but still, if this really happened, and this was conceptualized by MIE. Let me identify MIE.
who provided the first sample.
That is, well, I guess if you're going to lead this thing and bring up this entire idea together, you got to lead by example.
I mean,
You got to put the poop
yeah,
in the bag. All right? It's one thing to
and
talk the
hand
talk.
shape it.
It's one thing to talk the talk,
Ugh.
but you also got to put the
Oh
poop in the
God,
bag.
it's so bad. It's so bad.
So this
We could use this peer-reviewed paper to discuss the peer review process and segue into segment 2. Wow. Poop. That's a lot. It's a lot. That's a lot.
it's
That's
sort
a
of
lot.
sort of stacking up and sort of rising.
Nope.
It's getting uncomfortable to walk in it right now.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gross.
But you know what? We're archaeologists, so we can definitely tell the difference between the poo and the shinola.
The what?
You never heard of that phrase? Can't tell the
No.
difference between shit and shinola?
No.
Shinola's a type of polish, shoe polish, popular in the early 20th century.
Ah.
Oh yeah, and mind you, this is also, we should have said this at the very beginning. This is, not the kind of poop knife most people would be familiar with. I'm sure, either people watching or people watching later or listening, so like, wait a minute, I remember having a poop knife. I've had a poop knife at camp. My grandma had a poop knife, And this is a classic instrument, improvised instrument, I should put it. It's sort of those, secondary uses of material culture that's very important to the archaeological record. Say you're in a place where the plumbing isn't so great, and
Oh.
and say you're on a really good high fiber diet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it just ain't going to go down the hole. So that's when you grab the old poop knife and you cut it up so it can go down the hole.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard this story a few times from a few different people about the old poop
I
knife.
have also heard of this before. It's not usually actually a knife though. It's like a
It could be a
or
stick
something.
or times, but
Yeah.
still, it's it's a non-intended, it's an improvised use of material,
Right.
to do something like this. So that's also another thing to remember about archaeology. Even when you think you know what it is, when you pulled it out of the ground, that may not have been what the actual use those people have had for them. Obviously, plenty of those types of things.
Yeah.
Glassware being reframed for as a cutting instrument.
Sure.
Bullets being used as toy pieces, game pieces,
Sure,
and things
yeah.
like that. Trying to think of any other good examples
Cardboard, yeah.
off the top of my head of sort of secondary uses.
Trying to think if I've got anything good.
Well, I mean, a classic modern one would be the Pringle can used as a speaker. You cut the hole in it so you can put your phone in
Oh,
there
yeah.
and have a speaker
Yep.
comes out.
Yeah.
That's a classic
That was
case
a good
of a secondary reuse of a material.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
it's something humans have always done for that.
Money
not-
pendants.
Well, yeah, the use of coins that's different types of things. So yeah, all sorts of cool stuff now. So yeah, we're about halfway through. We burned through 2 segments, but that's fine. So now that we've honed our skeptical eye a little bit now, and this has nothing to do with poo whatsoever. Recently, Tom and I had some interactions over Twitter with a History Channel 2 Travel Channel celebrity. But I will let Tom sort of carry the story, and I'll just fill in where I can help.
Okay. So, if you follow me on Twitter or Bill, we have both on a couple of occasions had interactions with Mr. Scott Wolter of America Unearthed fame, or is it Unearthed America? America Unearthed.
I think it's America Unearthed.
America Unearthed. And he has a pretty and Serra as well, actually. That they would.
But she's been blocked.
He has
now.
a very yeah, he has a very devoted following. It's probably a good way to put it. His fans are very mm, they're very entrenched in his theories, and questioning those theories does not win you any points with them, as Serra found out. And I think some of that also is, and I mean it sucks, but it's the truth. Is probably because she's a woman, and the perception of her as an expert in anything is turned down because of misogyny being just rampant in anonymous uh, comment sections, essentially. Um, but so Mr. Walter and I got into it the first time. He said some rather He made some rather questionable statements regarding the existence slash survival of certain Native American groups in the uh, upper Midwest. And we had a long discussion about Vikings and Templars and the Kensington Runestone and a number of other related topics. And Mr. Walter has published several books on these topics. Bill just finished reading. What was the name of yours?
Akhenaten,
Akhenaten.
Akhenaten, and
Akhenaten,
the Akhenaten
the
to the
founding
Holy
father.
Grail, about the founding fathers. Um,
Yeah.
it's basically, I mean, so the general thesis that um, Scott Wolter uses is that the Kensington Runestone, a stone tablet presumably discovered in the late 19th century, 1898, in Kensington, Minnesota,
Yep.
is a material that contains Swedish ruins, uh,
Norwegian.
Norwegian, sorry, wrong Scandinavian country, Norwegian ruins, which happen to, but also include coded language associated with the Templars. And also, additionally, this tablet also has a date on it of 1362 or 72.
62 sounds right. I haven't actually looked at the inscription on it. I
Yeah.
so we got into another discussion about this. What was the I don't remember what the impetus of it was, but I had been asked. He did this technical report on the stone, petrography. It's a real thing. To analyze, or no, what was it, petrographic?
It's
Was it
photography.
petrographic analysis?
It's
Yeah, it was
photography.
petrographic analysis of the inscription to determine the age of the inscription itself. So the actual carved runes on the stones. And he did this technical report. It's not actually published anywhere. It is the results of it are supposed to be published in the book. It's Kensington Runestone, compelling new evidence by, hold on, I got
Scott
the,
and some.
yes, Scott Wolter and I want to say Richard Nielsen in 2006. Let me pull it up real quick. Um, yeah, Richard Nielsen and Scott Wolter, and it was published in 2006 by Scott's publishing company. The Was it Lake Superior Agate Publishing Company,
Right.
or Inc., something like that. Um, and it is supposed to be the most comprehensive study of the evidence surrounding the stone. Um, I had to explain to Scott that having your colleagues review your paper is not the same as the peer review process. If you're not familiar with the peer review process, you submit a paper in a format for a journal. The journal then sends that paper to anonymous readers to give comments before publishing the paper. If a consensus can be reached regarding the edition of the paper, it gets published.
As a
And
reminder, the
yeah,
poop paper we were just talking about had one anonymous reviewer, so at least that even followed
yeah,
a little bit more of the scientific process.
right. And in hard sciences like geology, it's even more serious. And Scott actually is a professional geologist. He has a company that has petrographic services, and he is a forensic geologist. So a geologist who does offer or is a consultant for insurance investigations and things like that, identifying materials and wear and things like that. Um, but there are parts. Uh, there are parts of the theory that are, let's go with, questionable.
Well, I think the biggest problem is demonstrating that petrography, which is basically looking at sort of the microscopic components of rocks. Rocks are never really, for the most part, a single material. There's some sort of concretion of multiple materials included. The most obvious and easiest ones for most people to see are things like sandstone. You can see it has sand particles and other particles of other little rocks, tiny rocks in it. But other stones have that too, but they're just a smaller size and maybe not necessarily visible to the naked eye. So with the photography is that they can sort of look at those materials, and it helps with identifications like sourcing. He's done a lot of material in sort of concrete. So knowing what the full stone materials of a sort of concrete is can maybe give you some good idea in terms of the stability, especially if you're after a
Right.
structural failure or something like that. You could
Right.
understand, how it's, what maybe was inside the material that maybe weakened it or strengthened it. What hasn't been really seen, and I've tried to do sort of Google Scholar searching on this type of material, or just general Scholar searching, is the use of this technology, use of this idea for temporal purposes, for the purposes of telling time. That is
So,
that was where I would initially think of, but that wasn't my interaction with him though. I had a different issue with him.
yeah. Um, but I mean there's good science there for relative dating two objects. If you have a inscription of the same material with a known date attached to it, and then you can compare those two and see if there is more or less wear on it, and they're in similar, or, maybe not identical, but at least similar environments, and exposed to the same kind of wear, you can then say, yes, this is older, or newer or older
Right.
than the known date or whatever. The one that keeps getting brought up though, or the he keeps saying that the Kensington runestone is not an archaeological question, and then he listed all of the like interdisciplinary things that archaeology does. So it was a linguistic and inscriptions and geology and history and something else, and said that's not archaeology, which is exactly what archaeology is. And that is the thing that I had the most issue with. And this is not the first time he has said that. He has claimed that on multiple occasions. And one of the big issues that archaeologists tend to have with this particular artifact is that there is no surrounding information. Like there's no corroborating sites nearby. There's no evidence of a battle. There's no, which is described in the rune inscription. They talk about having losing a couple of men. There's no camp. There's no material culture at all besides this stone. And I want to say at least one survey has been done in the area surrounding the stone in order to identify a camp or some other evidence that there was Vikings nearby, Norwegian explorers, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah.
Um, and the one thing, so I was talking to him for a while about this, and he eventually I agreed to read and review his book, Kensington Runestone: Compelling New Evidence, by him and Nielsen. And the one thing that did jump up, because, and this is went to This is the thing that I've always had the biggest issue with Mr. Walter's theories is this connection between Templars, Vikings, and the Freemasons. They are all apparently either the same organization or connected organizations or something like that, which may get discussed a little better in your book, Bill.
Well, I think he's sort of off the Viking train by this point. He sort of says that that's sort of how people early on looked at it, because he wants to push it to the 17th century, and by that point the Vikings there are no Vikings.
Right.
But he does not explain how Templars, in his theory, these Templars sail out of the Atlantic ports of France to the New World by going by Oak Island and by
Don't even.
Newport, Rhode Island, before going back
God.
through the Great Lakes to make their way across to Minnesota without
The Rhode Island one.
leaving
The
any
Newport.
cultural material. But yeah, these are the French. Now, and then, at least in the book I read, this is straight up
French?
Holy Blood, Holy Grail, Da Vinci Code.
Yeah.
That the Templars had the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant. Because I also watched the 2009 movie Holy Grail in America, which Scott was a very prominent port of, which is also this whole continues his whole Kensington runestone theory. That
Okay. I do have a quick correction for me.
Okay.
You were right; it was Sweden.
Okay.
Because I went to go find how he connects the Templars to the Vikings. Apparently, there are signs on. So this is a quote from the book. Also found signs on the Kensington runestone that we thought were the unmistakable mark of the medieval order of Teutonic Knights. This is the introduction, so they don't actually provide evidence at this point. Teutonic Knights, an order active in the Baltic Sea and Gotland, Sweden. So Sweden, from its sanction by the Pope in 1199 and 1525, when the order became secular. The Knights Templar, also known as the Brethren of the Sword, which I'm not a Crusades scholar, so I don't know enough about this. Amalgamated with the Teutonic Knights in the Baltic in 1237 after horrendous losses in battle. So I am very much looking forward to the evidence they have to corroborate that.
Well, I can tell you by the
Mashup.
next book. Well, no, I'm 3 books later because the Hooked X is the next book. Then I'm the book after that. Yeah, by the time it gets to my book, that's not mentioned at all. Just
Weird, because he's really all about the Templars being
no,
also
the Templars.
Freemasons.
The Templars and the Freemasons is there. The Teutonics.
Okay, so the Vikings.
The Vikings and Teutonics have sailed off. They're gone.
Okay. Well, it's also a different time period.
Because, you would have had scholars. But you would have had learned scholars. This is where he brings in the monks. The Cistercian monks. Or Cistercian monks. Those are his way out. Because he brought scholars. And these are scholars who would have known older languages and such. So that's how you... See, there's always an answer. And that's the thing about pseudo anything. There's always an answer. Things can't be falsified conveniently.
Yeah,
science, we can find it can be falsified. We can say, what we thought isn't true. So we're on to the next thing now. But somehow in pseudo,
follow the new line of it.
There's always a new reason. There's always you're presented with information. There's always a reason why that happened.
So I'm going to read this book, and at some point I will write something up, either in a blog post or something.
Yeah, to review the book. At some point we're going to have a major, like, Templars in America discussion, and I don't know if that's going to be like on here or maybe over on Serra's channel, Archie Fantasies, which is maybe more appropriate home for things like that, since Go over to ArchaeoFantasies if you want to see me and Serra watching episodes of America Unearthed and reacting to them live. We've got a few episodes of those in the book, so
Pretty good.
So
We can all keep the backpack count.
the backpack count is very important. So let's go ahead.
It's riveting.
Yeah.
It really is.
So let's go ahead now, and we're going to sort of wrap up the first hour now. I see it's 10 till, but I got a few minutes of stuff to talk about. Don't worry. And with that, it's sort of introducing what we're going to be doing at the top of the hour. We're introducing our new show, Rituals and Rolls Recap. If you're sort of have been following us for a while, you'll notice we keep using this term Rituals and Rolls, and so far it's been mostly where we play video games. But back in July, if you remembered, if you were there, for our Session 0, which is the podcast should be out sometime shortly after we record this, a few days or so after we record this, but it's available on video on demand right here on the ArchaeoRPG YouTube channel. We had our Session 0 of our actual play tabletop role-playing campaign, where we discussed sort of the ideas behind it, some of the characters that you're going to be introduced, and how tabletop role-playing game and the world of archaeology are kind of going to blend in together. And we'll go much more into that on the other side of the hour. But this show, the purpose of this show is going to be, while we're playing the game, we are going to try to, as best as possible, to stay within the game. We're not going to metagame, we're not going to lecture on archaeological theory or anything on that. So there's good chances we're going to breeze by things that may be important or anything on that. So with that in mind, this is the purpose of this show. It's one, it's a good way to sort of get a recap episode, but two, it gives us an opportunity to sort of break down those ideas that we discussed, whether it's, colonialism, how to set up a survey, things like that. How do we identify artifacts? How do we identify a site? How much material do we need for a site? How do we interact with flora and fauna when we're going on an expedition? How do we gear up for an expedition? Like what tools and materials are we going to need when we're going to be away from home for a long period of time, and maybe away from home where we're not going to be near like hotels and things like that. Those are all real questions that we as archaeologists have to answer. So the game will give us, within this game world, we'll get to sort of play with that. And so we can kind of show through gameplay what an archaeologist's life looks like. But additionally, Dungeons and Dragons sort of plays along with a lot of archaeological tropes, like a lot of popular culture. And we're going to sort of examine those as well. The hunt for treasure and all that kind of good stuff for that. And so it's going to be a back and forth. And so that's sort of going to be the purpose of this. And so we'll definitely be doing that much more on top of the hour on that. So hope you guys stick around. Now, for people in the podcast world, this is going to be different. It's going to be a separate podcast on your feed. So look for a different podcast. It'll be called Rituals and Rolls Recap. So this podcast will actually be ending for you in the next few minutes. And then there'll be another podcast sitting in your feed, hopefully, called Rituals and Rolls Recap. Listen to that for that there. So that way then these shows also get to sort of keep their own voice. That's what Rituals and Roll Recap is going to be. But more importantly, as you sort of saw today, with Still Digging, once we got past technical difficulties, this show now is going to be an archaeology show. We are laser focused on the world of archaeology, but that's a huge, broad world, because basically if a human interacts with a thing, an archaeologist will be there 50 years later. Or
sooner sometimes.
So that's going to be our thing for that. We're going to be much more focused. We're going to try to do a few more segments. If we had all four of us here, we probably would have had 4 segments today. Everyone's sort of getting a chance to sort of get their piece in. But with only two of us here, we just, we pick two big themes and then sort of hey, we're doing something different at the top of the hour on top of that. So Tom, anything you want to add?
I do actually. I want to thank Scott for being a good sport about letting me review his book and sending me a copy of that. And I am actually really looking forward to this Rituals and Rolls recap.
Episode
zero, the pre-cap.
Right. It's because it's not going to be, yes. The recap is not a recap because we haven't had a cap to yes.
It's just a cap.
That's right. So we're going to take about a 5-minute break at the top of the hour, 9 o'clock Eastern. We'll be back on here. Gives us a chance to redo the set. It'll be a whole different setup. You'll be...
What?
Yeah. It's like magic.
I don't even know. Maybe Amma will actually be able to join us.
Hopefully. That's the other thing we can do with this is see if Amma can join us, see if maybe Sarah's made it home. She's getting ready for a very long field project. So she's got some preparations to do. So we'll be at the top of the hour. So thank you all for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact us at ArchaeoRPG on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Our email address is archaeorpg@gmail.com. If you wish to support our show, you can become a patron at www.patreon.com/ArchaeoRPG. Also, please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the word. And once again, thank you, and keep digging.